Hi students, in this video we're going to cover section 5.2, reasons for congruence. This is part of a two-part video for congruency postulates. So in this section we're going to be using 4 congruence theorems to prove that triangles are congruent. But before we get into that, we need to examine how we can tell or when we can assume a side is congruent to a side of another triangle, or an angle of one triangle is congruent to an angle of another triangle. So those are our objectives. Learn when to assume one side is congruent to another side, and learn when to assume an angle is congruent to another angle. All right, so given 2 triangles and we're trying to prove the 2 triangles are congruent, there are only 3 reasons that the triangles can be marked, the sides can be marked as congruent. Is given definition of midpoint or reflexive property. And you should always mark the diagram so that the congruence that you've determined is visible on the diagram. So that first reason is it is given. And so when I say it's given, you are directly told that the congruence happens. So in this case, we're given segment IK is congruent to JU. So what you should do is mark IK as congruent to JU. And so now you've used that information. The second thing that could happen is you are told that a segment is a midpoint. Remember, a midpoint divides a larger segment into 2 smaller congruent segments. So in this proof, we're given J is the midpoint of segment IV. So that means that segment IJ is congruent to segment VJ. So what we can deduce from that is segment IJ is congruent to segment VJ. That's the information that we get from that. We don't get a direct congruence, but we get something that we can assume from that. The last thing is the last side congruence is the reflexive property, and that's going to occur only when a side is in 2 triangles at the same time. And so that's going to mean that segment is congruent to itself, and we call that the reflexive property. In this picture, we have 2 triangles. We have triangle RXW, and we have triangle YXW. And we can see that this side XW is in both triangles. So we're going to put a single mark to mark it congruent to itself. The reflexive property will look something like segment WX is congruent to segment WX. And that's because that side is in both triangles. It's in this triangle and it is in this triangle. So again, reflexive property means it's congruent to itself. So now we have 5 reasons why angles are congruent when we're doing proofs with triangles. The first reason is that it's given. 2, we have vertical angles. 3, we have an angle bisector. And 4 and 5 are alternate interior angles and corresponding angles. For 4 and 5 to happen, you must have lines, parallel lines. And you're either told the lines are parallel, or in the diagram, they are already marked as parallel. And remember, parallel, you can tell 2 lines are parallel to each other if they have like the same number of arrow markings on the line segment. So again, it is given with a triangle is with an angle is going to be something like angle GFE is congruent to angle VWU. So angle GFE is this angle. And then angle VWU is this angle. So we're just going to put the same number of arcs at that angle location. And so now we know that angle GFE is congruent to angle VWU because we marked our diagram as so. Next, we could have vertical angles. Remember, vertical angles are formed by intersecting lines. So you won't be told that angles are vertical in a proof. You will just have to look at the diagram and figure that out. So in this case, we know that we have vertical angles in the middle. So what we can deduce from this is that angle JHI is congruent to angle XHZ. And so vertical angles should share the same vertex. In this case, they both share that vertex H. And that's how we know we have a pair of vertical angles. That's the only thing we can assume. Angles looking congruent does not count. Next, we could have an angle bisector. If you're told that a segment's an angle bisector, it means it takes that larger angle and divides it into two smaller congruent angles. Here we're told that XW bisects angle SWV. So angle SWV is this big angle here. So now knowing that XW bisects angle SWV means that this angle is congruent to that angle. So the two angles are angle SWX. That's going to be congruent to angle angle VWX. That's the congruence that we get. And we know that, again, because we're told. You can't assume it. You have to be told. For 4, if you're told a pair of sides are parallel, the two things you should check for are either alternate interior angles or corresponding angles. In this picture, we're given that CR is parallel to QS. Remember, this symbol means is parallel to. And let's see. So CR is parallel to QS. So that means we're just going to mark that like this. So CR is parallel to QS. And so now we have our parallel lines. That means that QR is a transversal. So we know that angle CRQ and angle SQR are congruent because they are alternate interior angles. So angle CRQ is congruent to angle SQR. The reason is alternate interior angles. That's how we know. All right. And the last reason that we have for congruence when it comes to angles is corresponding angles. So remember, corresponding angles are in the same spot relative to a transversal and a pair of parallel lines. So we're given that AB is parallel to CM. So in that case, AL is a transversal. So angle A is going to be congruent to angle C, or we could say angle BAC is congruent to angle MCL, and that's because they are corresponding angles. So those are the 5 reasons that angles are congruent. So total, we have 3 reasons that sides can be marked congruent and 5 reasons that angles can be marked congruent. And there are no other reasons when we are writing proofs for triangles. All right, so hopefully this is a good study aid. We isolated the reasons for congruence, and we're going to use those in the next few lessons for proofs. All right, thanks for watching.